You know, in mathematics, there's this thing called a theorem, a mathematical statement that requires proof, rigorous, methodical proof. Until it's proven, it has no value in the mathematical world. But here's the tragedy of our generation. We've come to believe that we are theorems, that our value, our worth, our very existence needs to be proven to others before it can be accepted. You've been living your life as if you're a mathematical equation that needs to be solved, as if your worth is a hypothesis waiting for verification. Let me tell you something. You are not a theorem. You are a human being created with intrinsic, immeasurable value. I remember growing up in the poverty-stricken neighborhoods of the Bahamas. We had nothing by the world's standards. I wore the same clothes day after day, often went to bed hungry. But my mother would look me in the eyes and say, "Myles, you are somebody, not because of what you have or what you do, but because of who you are." That truth transformed my life. Why do we feel this crushing need to validate our existence through the approval of others? Think about it. From the moment you wake up, you're on a mission to prove yourself. Prove yourself to your boss. Prove yourself to your spouse. Prove yourself to your children. Prove yourself to people on social media who don't even know your name. The exhaustion of this constant validation seeking is destroying your potential. God never created you to prove yourself. He created you to be yourself. When the creator of the universe formed you in your mother's womb, he didn't make a theorem. He made a masterpiece. You don't prove a masterpiece. You display it. You celebrate it. You allow it to fulfill its purpose. This need for validation has become an epidemic in our society. It's the silent killer of purpose and fulfillment. Young people are taking their own lives because they couldn't prove their worth to their peers. Marriages are dissolving because partners are seeking validation outside the home. Careers are chosen not from purpose, but from the need to impress others. Let me make a clear distinction. A theorem requires external validation to have meaning, but a human being, you, possess intrinsic value that cannot be added to or taken away from. Your worth isn't waiting for proof. It's waiting for expression. When you stand before a magnificent oak tree, do you demand that it prove it's a tree? Of course not. Its very existence is self-evident. The same is true for you. You don't need to prove you have value. You need to express the value you already possess. The moment you try to prove yourself to others, you've already failed, because you've accepted their authority to judge your worth. You've surrendered your God-given right to exist on your own terms. You've handed the keys of your life to someone who didn't create you and doesn't know your purpose. This validation seeking isn't just harmful, it's unnecessary. The one who matters most has already validated you. Before you accomplished anything, before you accumulated any possessions, before anyone applauded your performance, your worth was established by your Creator. I've counseled billionaires who have everything the world says they should want, yet they're empty inside. Why? Because they've spent their lives proving theorems instead of living their purpose. They've collected evidence of their worth instead of expressing the worth they already had. What you're chasing, the approval, the validation, the applause, it can never satisfy. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The validation leaks out and you're left empty, starting the cycle again. What if, and this is a life-changing what if everything you've been chasing is actually chasing you? What if the approval you seek is found in accepting who you already are? What if the proof you're scrambling to produce has already been established? Let's go to the source. Every river has a beginning, and this river of unworthiness that runs through our lives has its headwaters somewhere. We aren't born questioning our value. Have you ever seen a baby wondering if it deserves to be fed? Of course not. That child cries out with complete confidence that its needs deserve to be met. So when did we start believing we needed to prove ourselves? Throughout human history, powerful forces have created systems where some people must prove their humanity to others. During colonization, entire populations were forced to adopt foreign languages, customs, and religions to demonstrate their worth as human beings. My own ancestors in the Bahamas experienced this reality. The oppressed internalized the message, you must prove you deserve to exist in this space. But it's not just historical systems. Your childhood was the training ground for validation seeking. When your achievements were celebrated, but your existence was taken for granted, you learned that doing was more important than being. When love was conditional on behavior, you learned that your worth fluctuated with your performance. Those early lessons weren't delivered with malice, but they planted seeds that grew into the forest of unworthiness you're now lost in. We've developed what I call approval addiction. Like any addiction, it has recognizable symptoms. You can't make decisions without consulting others. You feel devastated by criticism. You change your opinion to match the room. You apologize excessively. You downplay your achievements to fish for compliments. You exhaust yourself trying to meet impossible standards. You compare yourself constantly to others. These aren't character flaws, they're withdrawal symptoms from the drug of external validation. What drives this addiction? Fear. Fear is the fertilizer for the tree of unworthiness. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of insignificance, fear of being exposed as not enough. We prove ourselves not to confirm our worth, but to quiet our fears. And our culture of comparison only intensifies these fears. Social media has become the stadium where we compete for validation. We post our highlights, filter our flaws, and count the likes as evidence of our value. We've reduced our complex, magnificent lives to metrics on a screen. The validation is instant but hollow, leaving us hungrier than before. We've never been more connected, yet never felt more need to prove ourselves. This is the great irony of our generation. Yet the scriptures tell a different story about your worth. Psalm 139 says, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." Ephesians tells us we are God's masterpiece, created for good works He prepared in advance. Isaiah says you are inscribed on the palms of His hands. These aren't values you earn. They're truths you inherit. Your worth was established before your birth. The price was paid before you took your first breath. Your value was determined by your Creator, not your culture. This isn't just spiritual rhetoric. It's the fundamental reality of your existence. I've counseled thousands of people across the globe, CEOs, political leaders, celebrities, people who by worldly standards had proven themselves. Yet behind closed doors, these same successful people confess they still feel unworthy. The man with the mansion still feels he needs a bigger one to prove himself. The woman with the impressive title still fears being exposed as an imposter. The celebrity with millions of followers still checks their phone for validation. The external proof never satisfies the internal void. This pursuit of proof is exhausting because it's endless. The goalposts of worthiness keep moving. You get the degree, but now you need the job. You get the job, but now you need the promotion. You get the promotion, but now you need the award. You get the award, but now you need to be recognized internationally. When does it end? It doesn't unless you realize you're playing a game that was rigged from the start. What you're really looking for isn't proof of your worth, but permission to be yourself. Permission you already have, but have forgotten. Permission that was granted to you by the one who made you. Permission no one can revoke, no matter how hard they try. The greatest freedom comes when you stop trying to be free. Sounds contradictory, doesn't it? But the deepest truths often come wrapped in paradox. When you stop struggling to prove your worth and simply accept the worth you already possess, that's when true liberation begins. I've had the privilege of working with government leaders across the Caribbean and Africa. People with power, influence, titles. Yet in private conversations, these powerful individuals often confess they still feel the need to prove themselves worthy of their positions. One prime minister told me, "Myles, I've achieved everything I set out to do, but I still feel like an imposter waiting to be exposed." This is a man who runs a country, yet runs from himself. What these leaders are missing, what many of us are missing, is an understanding of our original design. You are not an accident or a mistake. You are a carefully crafted solution to a problem in your generation. Your fingerprints are unique among the billions of people on this planet, not by chance, but by design. Your voice, your perspective, your particular combination of talents and passions, these aren't random. They're strategic. Self-discovery differs fundamentally from self-improvement. Self-improvement assumes inadequacy. It says, you're not enough as you are, so you need to become something else. Self-discovery, on the other hand, says, everything you need is already within you, waiting to be uncovered. It's not about adding something new. It's about removing the false identities and expectations that have buried your true self. I want to introduce you to a principle that changed my life: potential versus performance. Your potential is what you're capable of becoming. Your performance is what you're currently doing. The gap between them isn't filled by proving yourself to others. It's filled by discovering yourself through purpose. A mango tree doesn't wake up wondering if it should produce mangoes or apples. It simply produces what it was designed to produce. It doesn't look at the palm tree and experience fruit envy. It doesn't try to grow coconuts to impress the other trees in the forest. Yet we humans spend our lives trying to produce what we weren't designed for, simply to earn the approval of others who don't understand our design in the first place. Your identity determines your purpose, and your purpose determines your performance. When you try to perform before understanding your identity, you're building a house without a foundation. That's why so many successful people feel empty. They've constructed impressive structures on shifting sand. I call your unique qualities your divine fingerprints. Just as no two fingerprints are identical, no two purpose signatures are the same. Your distinct combination of passions, talents, experiences, and even pain creates a purpose profile that no one else can replicate. When you understand this, you stop trying to be a photocopy of someone else's life and start embracing the original that you were created to be. And here's where I might get a bit sarcastic. Our society has an obsession with conformity that borders on the ridiculous. We claim to value uniqueness while punishing anyone who actually displays it. We tell our children, be yourself, then spend 18 years molding them to fit into standardized boxes. We praise innovation in theory, but resist it in practice. It's as if we're running a factory designed to turn unique human beings into identical products, then wondering why so many people feel defective. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs the original you. Think about it. Every major advancement in human history came from someone who stopped trying to prove themselves and started expressing their unique design. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't change civil rights by trying to be someone else. Mother Teresa didn't transform Calcutta by following someone else's blueprint. They understood that authenticity is more powerful than conformity. Your liberation comes when you realize that you don't need everyone's approval to fulfill your purpose. In fact, universal approval might be a sign you're not fulfilling your purpose at all. True purpose often disrupts the status quo. It challenges comfortable assumptions. It refuses to fit neatly into existing categories. Let me ask you something that might change everything. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail and no one was watching? If there was no need to prove yourself, no opinions to consider, no validation to seek, what would your life look like? Who would you become? What problems would you solve? What joy would you create? That answer, the one that just flashed through your mind, that's not just a daydream. That's a glimpse of your true self. That's the person you were designed to be before the world told you to be something else. And rediscovering that person is the greatest adventure you'll ever undertake. Have you ever calculated the true cost of living for others' approval? We talk about financial investments, career investments, property investments. But what about the investment you've made in proving yourself to others? Let me tell you, the return on that investment is bankruptcy of the soul. When you live for the applause, you die when it stops. I've seen it happen countless times. The politician who loses an election and loses his identity along with it. The athlete whose career-ending injury becomes a life-ending crisis. The executive whose retirement party marks the beginning of depression, not relaxation. When your worth is tied to external validation, the absence of that validation feels like the absence of worth itself. I've had the privilege of traveling to over 70 nations, meeting people from every imaginable background and circumstance, from the tribal villages of Africa to the boardrooms of Europe, from the favelas of Brazil to the mansions of North America. And no matter the culture, the struggle remains the same. Human beings everywhere are exhausting themselves, trying to prove their value to others. The mental toll is staggering. Anxiety that never quiets, depression that creeps in when the validation fades, the constant fear of being found out as not good enough, the endless internal dialogue, questioning your every move, analyzing how others perceive you. Your mind becomes a courtroom where you're perpetually on trial, but the verdict never comes back innocent. The emotional cost is just as devastating. Joy becomes conditional on approval. Peace becomes dependent on performance. Love becomes transactional. You're only as lovable as your last achievement. Your emotions become a roller coaster tied to the opinions of others. And let me tell you, that's a ride that will make you sick. When relationships are built on the foundation of proving worth, they become transactional rather than transformational. You become a slave to the opinions of your masters. Your boss holds the power to validate your professional worth. Your spouse holds the power to validate your personal worth. Your friends hold the power to validate your social worth. And slaves cannot have authentic relationships with their masters. This pursuit leads to the most crippling inauthenticity. You become a chameleon, changing colors to blend into whatever environment might offer validation. Your values become negotiable. Your convictions become flexible. Your personality becomes whatever the situation demands. Eventually, you lose track of who you actually are beneath all those adaptations. I remember counseling a man in Jamaica who had reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. He had the corner office, the luxury car, the beautiful family, all the external markers of value. But sitting in my office, this powerful man broke down in tears. I've spent so long proving myself, he said, that I've forgotten who I am. I don't know what I actually enjoy anymore. I don't know what I actually believe anymore. I'm just a collection of whatever has worked to get me approval. The graveyards are filled with people who spent their lives trying to prove themselves. They achieved greatness in the eyes of others, but never achieved peace in their own hearts. They conquered external mountains, but were defeated by internal valleys. They built monuments to their accomplishments, but never built a home for their authentic selves. This cycle of validation seeking creates a threshold of never enough. No amount of external proof satisfies the internal void. You get the promotion, but now you need a bigger one. You reach the sales target, but now you need to exceed it. You gain 1,000 followers, but now you need 10,000. The validation you receive today is forgotten tomorrow, and the hunger returns, more demanding than before. The highest price you pay for external validation is not knowing who you truly are. When your life has been lived through the lens of others' expectations, you have no reference point for your authentic self. You've been so busy proving your worth that you've never explored your purpose. You've spent so much time being who others wanted that you've never discovered who you were created to be. This journey isn't a sprint. It's a daily decision to value your inherent worth. Breaking free from validation patterns that have defined your life for decades won't happen overnight. But neither did those patterns form overnight. They were built one decision at a time, and they'll be dismantled the same way. One choice, one day, one moment at a time. I want to acknowledge something important. This is difficult work. Our brains have neural pathways deeply carved by years of seeking approval. Our emotional reflexes have been conditioned to respond to external validation. Our social circles often reinforce these patterns. If this journey were easy, we'd all be living in complete authenticity already. So how do we begin? First, by identifying your validation-seeking behaviors. These are the moments when your decisions are driven by the desire for approval rather than authenticity. Notice when you say yes, when you want to say no. Notice when you change your opinion to match others. Notice when you downplay your achievements to fish for compliments. Notice when you exaggerate to impress. These are symptoms of the validation disease. Second, practice radical self-acceptance. This doesn't mean accepting mediocrity or ceasing growth. It means acknowledging that your worth isn't dependent on your growth. You're worthy right now exactly as you are. Imperfect, unfinished, in process. Your worthiness doesn't fluctuate with your performance. Third, set boundaries with what I call approval dealers. These are the people in your life who dispense validation like a drug, keeping you addicted and dependent. They might be family members whose approval you've sought since childhood. They might be friends whose opinions you value above your own. They might be bosses or colleagues whose recognition you crave. Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting these people off. It means no longer giving them authority over your worth. Fourth, reconnect with your source of worth. For me, this is found in understanding my relationship with my Creator. When you recognize that your worth was established by God before you took your first breath, no human opinion can diminish it. Your value was set by the highest authority. Why would you appeal to lower courts? Fifth, celebrate your uniqueness rather than hiding it. Those aspects of yourself that don't fit in aren't flaws to be corrected. They're features to be expressed. Your differences aren't deviations from the standard. They're distinctions that fulfill your purpose. Consider the metaphor of a seed. A seed doesn't question its worth or prove itself by becoming something else. It simply grows into what it already contains. A seed doesn't prove itself by becoming something else. It proves itself by becoming fully what it already is. There's no insecurity in a seed, no need for validation, just quiet confidence in its inherent design. The transformative power of seeing yourself through the Creator's eyes cannot be overstated. When God looks at you, He doesn't see projects to be improved or problems to be fixed. He sees His masterpiece. He sees purpose. He sees potential waiting to be expressed. He sees value that doesn't need to be proven because He established it from the beginning. I remember my own journey through this process. Growing up poor in the Bahamas, I sought validation through academic achievement, then through ministry success. I measured my worth by the size of crowds, the number of books sold, the countries that invited me to speak. It was exhausting. My breakthrough came when I realized that on my best day, when thousands applauded, and on my worst day, when I felt like a failure, my worth remained exactly the same. That revelation transformed everything. And let me speak candidly about our cultural pressures. We live in a world obsessed with metrics, as if human value can be quantified like stock prices. Your followers, your salary, your title, your address, all supposed indicators of your worth. It's absolute nonsense. The world is filled with critics who haven't created anything themselves, ready to assess your value without understanding your purpose. You were born valid. Your existence is your proof. The moment you took your first breath, your worth was established. Not by what you would do, but by who you already were. Imagine waking up tomorrow without the burden of anyone's expectations. Imagine moving through your day without the weight of proving your worth. Imagine making decisions based not on who might approve, but on what aligns with your authentic self. This isn't fantasy. It's the life you were designed for. What does it look like to live from inherent worth rather than seeking to prove it? First, you'll experience a new authenticity in your relationships. When you're no longer performing for approval, you can be genuinely present. You'll allow others to know the real you, not the carefully curated version designed to impress. And ironically, this authenticity will create deeper connections than your performance ever could. You'll develop confidence without arrogance. There's a profound difference between the two. Arrogance comes from insecurity. It's loud, defensive, needing constant reinforcement. True confidence comes from knowing your worth. It's quiet, peaceful, requiring no external validation. It doesn't diminish others to elevate itself. It doesn't fear criticism because criticism can't touch its foundation. Your service to others will transform. When you serve to gain approval, you're actually serving yourself. When you serve from inherent worth, you're free to focus entirely on others' needs. Your generosity won't come with strings attached. Your kindness won't keep score. Your impact will multiply because your motives will be pure. You'll establish boundaries without apology. When your worth isn't tied to others' approval, you can say no without fear of rejection. You can disagree without anxiety. You can stand for your convictions even when they're unpopular. You'll no longer be controlled by the subtle manipulation of withheld approval. You'll pursue purpose without permission. Instead of waiting for someone to validate your dreams, you'll move forward in the confidence of your calling. You won't need a committee to approve your vision. You won't require unanimous support for your next step. You'll act from internal conviction rather than external confirmation. History is filled with individuals who lived from intrinsic worth despite opposition. Think of Nelson Mandela, who maintained his dignity through 27 years of imprisonment. Consider Rosa Parks, who knew her worth despite a society that denied it. Remember Mother Teresa, serving the poorest of the poor without seeking the world's applause. They weren't trying to prove anything. They were simply being who they were created to be. Your daily decisions will shift from what will they think to, is this aligned with who I truly am? This single change in perspective will revolutionize every area of your life. your career choices, your relationships, your priorities, your use of time. It will filter out the noise of others' expectations and amplify the voice of your authentic purpose. Imagine the impact you could have when you're no longer exhausting your energy on validation seeking. All that mental and emotional capacity previously consumed by proving yourself, what could you accomplish if you redirected it toward your purpose? What problems could you solve? What beauty could you create? What legacy could you build? You are not a theorem to be proven, but a mystery to be lived. You're not an equation to be solved, but a story to be told. You're not a hypothesis awaiting verification, but a masterpiece awaiting expression. Every great life throughout history has been lived from this truth. Starting today, give yourself permission to live unproven and fully alive. Release yourself from the exhausting cycle of validation seeking. Embrace the freedom of inherent worth. Step into the purpose that's been waiting for you all along. The world is waiting, not for your proof, but for your presence. Show up as you are. Not perfect, not proven, but authentic. Not validated by others, but valuable by design. The greatest gift you can give humanity isn't your performance. It's your authentic self, fully expressed and fully alive.